there and welcome back to the channel. Most of you are probably already familiar with Dexter, my double cab Toyota Hilux. It's currently in contention to be the best vehicle that I own, ever have owned, probably will ever own, because it just works flawlessly always. Never goes wrong, goes wherever I point its nose. It's faultlessly capable and it never falters. So that just begs the question, what on earth have I done now? My rear leaf springs are gone. That's my differential. Obviously, this being a 4Y, it is very slow, extremely underpowered, and that is the biggest issue of this vehicle. Second biggest issue is that, well, I do not have a diff lock of any sort. Both my differentials are fully open. My suspension is properly sorted, so it doesn't really cause much of an issue, but it can be better. I can have a better car. There's only one obvious solution to that problem, and that is to install a diff lock. But those are expensive. Very expensive. There's only really one widely available diff lock on the market in South Africa, and that's the ARB air locker. That's anywhere between 20 and 30 grand. Because not only do you need the locker, you need the compressor to engage the locker. You can also run what's known as a lunchbox locker, auto locker, Eaton locker, whatever you want to call it. What's it also? A locker? A lockrite? Lots of names for one specific thing. Basically, it's an automatic locker. It senses that the one wheel is spinning faster than the other one. It goes dunk, and then all of a sudden you have a locked diff. Obviously, you do not want to run that in the rear diff on a street car that sees tarmac use. Also, it'll probably screw you around a little bit on rocks. You can run them in the front because you've got the disengageable hubs, and once you aren't applying torque to them, they will free up. But I don't like having something that I don't have control over. Also, if that auto locker engages just right, you snap an axle. But there are other options. For instance, what I am running in the back of Blue. Yes, I know Blue is looking very sad. I will get to that. I will address that, fix it. We'll be driving Blue very soon. In the back of Blue, I am running a clutch style limited slip diff. You know this because there's a sticker. To be more specific, the particular LSD that's in the back of Blue is out of a Mark III Toyota Supra. Yes, it's a clutch style, but it's also known as a plated style LSD, which is progressive. So, the more torque I apply, the more it locks up. So it works an absolute treat off-road. It's never fully locked, it's never fully disengaged, so you can do skids. And it has something that's called breakaway torque. Basically, it just means it will disengage more or less just before it snaps an axle. And there's not much of a market for them in South Africa, so if you do find one, you can usually scoop them up for quite cheap. If you find one, because they are exceedingly rare. I found the one in the back of Blue by sheer coincidence, and I've been actively searching for about 4 years now, haven't found one since. Hen's teeth. So the issue still is, I've got open differentials, can't do a diff lock, too expensive, can't do an LSD because I have not been able to find one. At least until my mate Patrick sent me a WhatsApp saying that he found one. You can actually see the clutches through those little windows right there. Cool as the differential may be, it still doesn't explain why my rear leaf springs are missing. Because Dexter is getting new leaf springs. The fronts are being replaced with these second-hand old man emus. I'm already running 4 blades up front, so I just took 1 blade out the front to make them match. They are 2-inch lift, so it'll either lift or go back to level. If it's too flat, I can just put these back and it'll be fine. These are second-hand Pro Comps. What I've done is also remove 1 blade, and I reinstalled the overload blades from Dexter's original leaf springs. I spent plenty of time trying to figure out what combination of springs would be most likely to yield the results that I want, but it's still a lot of guesswork. So likelihood is I put them in, they're wrong, I take them out, repack them, put them in until they are right. Or I once again get lucky like I did in the first video of me doing springs on this thing, go watch it, and they just go in and work. Which I'm really hoping for, because it's a lot of not fun work, a lot of heavy work, and doing stuff more than once in general sucks. Sadly, before I can touch the springs, I need to sort out the differential because I kind of need to put the wheels back on to figure out the new ride height. So tomorrow I need to pop into town, get new carrier bearings, and get them installed. Very annoying that they press onto that, but I guess that's just how most differentials are put together. So that has to be done. Then I can start with assembly. I really do hope I can find the bearings, because if I can't, so in the here and now, what I need to do is I need to pull the side shafts and split this casing, get the current carrier out and see what's going on inside of here. Top tip, if you ever plan on doing something like this yourself, be sure to free up your wheel nuts while the wheels are still attached to the rest of the car. And that's just about me done for today. I've got everything nice and tidy and packed into the garage. All of my bolts, hardware, the new center portion, everything is in there. I need to go put that thing back on charge. And one thing left, I need to crack open that nut because I need to get to the carrier bearing, so I know what spec carrier bearings to get tomorrow to put on that center portion, so that center portion can go in there. Could be a crappy job, could be relatively straightforward. It's just a bunch of bolts, and then that thing should pop right out once you break the RTV loose. The RTV being the problem. I'm not going to bore you with that on camera though, so I will check back up with you tomorrow. Hello there, if you couldn't already tell by the different colored shirt, it is tomorrow. This morning I spent hunting down the new carrier bearings, cleaning everything up. Everything's basically ready for assembly now. I know it looks terrible. I've got a system. It's in my head, it's on the floor, it works, okay? When it comes to the South African domestic market Hiluxes, you got two main types of rear axles. You got your local, aka Gearmax, and your import, which would be your proper 8-inch Toyota rear axle. The diff that I will be using is the 4-cylinder, aka the 4-rib differential. You know this because it has 1, 2, 3, 4 ribs on it. It's the weaker one, and these typically came with this. This is the third member out of that. This is your 2-pinion third member. You know it's a 2-pinion because it's got a big old window in the middle of it, and it's got 2 pinions because it only has one shaft for the spider gears, and then you can see it there doing its thing. With the other kind of diff that I have in blue, actually, let me walk over there and show you quick. The diff that I currently have in blue actually came out of that car, which is a factory turbo diesel car. So blue has the stronger turbo diesel 6-rib diff. And if you couldn't already tell, you can tell it's a 6-rib diff because it has, well, 6 ribs on the side of it, and those normally came with the 4-pinion third members. And when you look at it quickly, a 4-pinion will look, well, just like my LSD looks here. You know it's a 4-pinion because it has 1, 2, 3, 4 pinions, 2 shafts for the spider gears, and it has these smaller service windows instead of the big old holes in the side. If you can't already tell, this is stronger. Anyways, back to what I have. This will be the diff that goes in there. Now, to make the Supro center portion work in the Hilux carrier, you need to use you can see it right there, there's the part number for it as well, a Land Cruiser carrier bearing. That's because the Land Cruiser bearing has the correct outer diameter to fit inside that carrier, but it has a larger inside diameter than the stock 2-pinion third member. For those of you curious, that's a 50mm ID and an 80mm OD. This video isn't meant to be a how to build your own differential tutorial. Neither am I going to pretend to be an expert at it. So, as per usual, I watched a YouTube video to figure out how to do this, which I have linked down below in the description. So please feel free to check it out if you want to know everything I know on this particular subject. It was a very helpful video, and it described how to put together this specific type of differential really, really well. Moment of truth. Well, not really moment of truth, but the big moment is finally upon us. It's going back in. When I took this diff apart, it was only running this gasket, no RTV at all. Wasn't leaking, it had zero issues, and it came apart super easily. By the way, Toyota original, only the best. Make sure it's oriented right way around. Now, I'm not quite confident enough to just run the gasket. It is very thin, and I ripped it. I will not be running the gasket. This has gone wrong in the most spectacular fashion it could have. My tube of RTV exploded from the backside, so I'm just going to accept my fate and smear it on like a cretin. And the third member is in. I do apologize for not getting that on camera. The camera died and I couldn't just pop a new battery in quickly, because once you've got the RTV on, it's sort of a race against time to get everything on and assembled before it starts to make a film and starts to dry up. So best I can give you is an accurate but kind of sort of more or less approximate dramatic reenactment. Yeah, that's pretty much what it's like putting those back in, mostly due to the amount of studs you sort of have to align and get it in, and the tolerances are tight, and just, especially if you're using RTV, it's not fun. But I need to get those rear leaf springs in because I need to get as much done as possible, and I can't work on that at all yet because I need to give the RTV some time to cure before I can go ahead and torque those down. So that can chill and I can pop those in. What I've done is jacked up the leaf spring to simulate ride height. I basically jacked it up until it started lifting the chassis. That way I know that the body weight is on the spring. And it's looking like I'm going to have about a 40mm lift. Hello there, it is once again tomorrow, so the work continues. This morning I spent a bit of time playing with different spring combinations. Turns out what I had already done was the optimal combination of springs I could use. For those of you wondering, Pro Comp, stock overloads. The reason I maintained the stock overloads was because the Pro Comps I got don't have any, and I still want to be able to tow a heavy trailer with this. Now I need to get that thing in, so I can get those things in, so I can get those things on, so I can get that thing on the floor, so I can reconnect the drive shaft and install my new 100mm extended rear brake line. Then the rear is finished, then I can do the front. I've got work. Alright, with everything back together again, I can see that I have basically maxed out what I can get out of Dexter. The shocks are just about at their maximum, the geometry is at its maximum. I think the spring can still go more because this is still here and it's literally up against that. So if I remove this, I should gain about 20mm of droop, more or less, not sure. Maybe not that much, but I will gain some. And if I measure the distance between the bump stops, that is now, at full extension, 245mm between the bump stop. Now I need to jack it up so I can get the wheels back on again. It just keeps going. Here we go. That's in the air now. I don't think that's enough for a tire though. Hi there. And if I measure this now, It is 170 millimeters between the two bump stops. What was it? No, I can't even remember the numbers. I don't know how I feel about it. So Dexter is back on the floor, and that is the current ride height in the rear. I measured it before and after doing the modifications, and it's around about a 50 millimeter or 2-inch lift. And I think it's a bit too tall for my liking. I do have the option to remove that lower, shorter overload leaf to win back, or not win back, to lower it about 10 to 12 millimeters. I might do that in the future. Right now though, that's too much work. For now I can just hope it settles down a little bit after I've taken it driving once or twice. Now I can do the front. Luckily, unlike the rear, I'm not putting a whole new differential in the front. So I can just do the leaves with everything in the front in place. You can do the front leaf springs on these without disconnecting anything except for the shocks. I'm gonna jack it up, get the front blades out of camera because I've done it before. It's not very interesting, and if you want to see more detail on how I did that the first time, you can just go watch my previous YouTube video. I went a bit more in depth on how to work on the leaf springs of these cars. I'll have the link to the video in the description. Top tip: when you are dropping your front differential, to remove your leaf springs, as you can see, they are not currently pictured. Be sure to remove or disconnect your torque rod, because when this droops, as you can see, it moves in an arc, it pulls your front differential forwards. And if it does that, enough of that, your front prop shaft falls out. Anyways, I've got the old leaves out and I've got them laid next to the new OMEs. If I compare them side to side outside of the car, the OMEs have... If I compare them side to side outside the car, the OMEs sit about 50 millimeters or 2 inches taller than the stock suspension. These OMEs are modified though, I must admit. All I did was remove one blade from each, just like I did with the OEM suspension. I will say though, I greatly doubt that this will raise the front end 50 millimeters, because the OME is way softer than the OEM springs. If you ever find yourself packing your own springs like this, what you want to do that works for me to figure out the spring rates, more or less approximately, kinda, sorta, maybe, to figure out the spring rates on the springs is literally just stand on top of them. You're going to want to do this next to a wall so you can grab onto a wall so you don't fall and break your bones, and you just jump up and down on it. And that will give you a pretty good approximation of what the spring rate is like. As you can see here, I'm jumping on the OME and it has a thunk that I don't like, but I'm going to run with it. It is much softer than the OEM one was. For some reason I can't say OME, Old Man Emu, and OEM in the same sentence without choking. I'm going to stop yapping now and get to work installing the springs. Check you later. Hello there, it is tomorrow. Again, mostly because after I got the suspension back in, after battling with the front prop shafts that kept falling out, I'd literally get the suspension aligned on the axle, dunk, prop falls out. Get the prop back on, suspension is out of alignment. Align suspension, dunk, prop falls out, and went on to do that 10 times. After I got everything back in, I started battling with the brakes. My front brake lines were too short, so now I have 120mm extended brake lines up front, 100mm extended in the rear, and then I started battling with the brakes. And the culprit was that thing right there. That is called your load proportioning valve, and it uses that long rod attached to the axle to gauge braking force depending on the load the vehicle is exerted. Load is exerted, the load on the back. And it is calibrated to measure the load on the back of the bed by measuring your ride height. So if you change your ride height, you need to adjust that proportioning valve accordingly, which I have now done, and now the brakes work. Just a little note, I just went up that in two-wheel drive. I could not do that. As you can see, it is working a treat, but there's one small thing that really annoys me about the new setup, and I will give you a hint. That's right, it is no longer as well balanced as it used to be. On the setup I had before, I could drive up those ramps and the car would still have been level. The rear is now stiffer than the front, in comparison at least, which is leading to this off-kilter articulation. I guess that's perfectly fine for practicality. It's softer up front, thus it'll be more comfortable, and it's stiffer in the rear, so I could still pull a trailer or something. In the end, I wound up with a more or less 40mm lift on all four corners, which I'm pretty happy with. I wanted a little bit more ground clearance for my breakover angle, but I didn't want to go too tall because I still want to keep my center of gravity as low down as possible. If you watched the previous video, which if you haven't, go do that, please. Just by looking at it, you already know I've got way more articulation because these ramps pretty much put the articulation on the old setup at its maximum, and as you can see, all four wheels are still loaded up. And not only that, but the suspension is not tensed up at all. So if I put this camera on a tripod and I go over here, I can actually show you how much play there still is in the suspension. So this is nowhere near its limits. And I did take it for a very spirited test drive last night, and I'm happy to report that it is a lot more comfortable than it used to be. Finally, if you know this platform, there's one thing you'll notice is missing. That's it right there. It is called your torque rod. I removed it. Before you run to the comments though, I'm not saying that you should remove your torque rod. Hell, I'm not even saying that it is a good idea. What I will show you is, this is blue. I bought this as my first vehicle. I have had it longer than I've had any other vehicle, and it never had a torque rod in it. That's because when they did the engine conversion, they removed it to make space for the sump and alternator. And I drove it for 3 years without complaints, any issues, without feeling unsafe or unstable, before I even knew that torque rods existed and that it didn't have it. And if I show you Susie, the Sasti Suzu, she also doesn't have a torque rod. And I feel perfectly safe and fine driving both of these vehicles. Thus, I feel safe to remove the torque rod on Dexter to win that extra little bit of advantage when off-road. I will be doing my due diligence and testing Dexter both with and without the torque rod to be able to report on my findings. Let me know if that's a video that you want to see, by the way. Just put it down in the comments if you want to see that. And with one last look at Dexter, I'm going to end this video right here. I hope it was entertaining, at least informative. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you want to see more of, what you want to see less of. Leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe. Tell your friends to subscribe, because an alarming amount of you watching these videos are not subscribed. I mean, come on. Anyways, I hope you have a good one. See you in the next video. Cheers.